Alright, subpart F entry level driver requirements and after February 7th, 2020. 38060 complying with the date of the training requirements of entry level driving is compliant with the provision of the subpart required by the after February 7th, 2020. 380-601, purpose and scope of the subpart establishes training requirements entry level drivers to define the subpart minimum content theory behind behind the wheel training circular with the entry level driving training and define the subpart applies only with the ones those drivers applying the commercial driver license or commercial driver license upgrade endorsement does not otherwise amend substantive commercial driver license requirement in Part 383 of this chapter. 38603, the rules of the subpart apply with all entry driver drivers define the subpart who intend to drive the commercial motor vehicle defined in 383.5. Chapter interstate, intrastate commerce except drivers exempted from the CDL requirements of 383, C, D, and H of this chapter. Drivers applying restricted CDL with the 383 E through G of this chapter. Veterans, military, commercial motor vehicle experience who meets all requirements condition 383.77 of the chapter. The drivers applying with removal of the restriction according to 383.135B7. Drivers hold the valid Class A, Class B CDL with the passengers B, school bus S, hazard material H endorsement issued with the Federal February 7th, 2020. Now required to comply with the subpart pertaining to CDL endorsements. Individuals obtaining the CLP before February 7th, 2020 are not required to comply with the subpart of the commercial CDL before CLP or renewed CLP expires. Individuals who attain the CLP on or after February 7, 2020 are required to comply with the subpart, except for the individuals seeking the H endorsement. Individuals must complete with the theory of the behind the wheel range and public road portion of the entry level driver training with 1 year of the completing of the first portion. Alright, 380-605 definition. The definition part 383, 384 subchapter apply with the subpart except for the stated below. The achievement and subpart behind the wheel. The instructor means the individual will provide the behind the wheel training involved with the actual operation of the commercial motor vehicle. The entry level the driver of the range of the public road meets one of those qualifications. Hold the commercial driver license for the higher class with all the endorsements necessary to operate the commercial motor vehicle with training to provide at least 2 years experience with the driver of the commercial motor vehicle requiring CDL. The same or higher class or same with endorsement meets all applicable state qualification requirements of commercial motor vehicle instructor. Holds the CDL with the same higher class with all the endorsements necessary to operate the commercial motor vehicle. For the training to provide with at least 2 years experience with the behind the wheel of the commercial motor vehicle instructor meets all the applicable state qualification requirements from applicable commercial motor vehicles instructors. Exemption behind the wheel instructor provides training solely with the range of which the non-public range of which not a public road is required for the CDL with the same of the higher class and all endorsement necessary of the commercial motor vehicle. For which the training is provided along with the instructor previously CDL with the same in the higher class with all the endorsements necessary to operate for the commercial motor vehicle with the training with the provide with the complies with the other requirements set forth in paragraph 1 and 2 of the definition. 3. The instructor commercial driver license canceled, suspended, revoked due to the disqualification offense of the identified in 383.51. Instructor for the prohibited engaging behind the wheel instructor for the 2 years following with the date of his or her commercial driver license reinstated. Behind the wheel range training with the means of the training behind the wheel training instructor entry level driver has the actual training with the actual control power unit during the driver license conducted with the brain's body behind the wheel range training does not include the entry level driver suspended with the operation of the commercial motor vehicle when he or she is not in control of the vehicle. Behind the wheel of the public road training must meet the training provided with the behind the wheel instructor for the entry level the actual control of the power to use the driver license conducted with the public road behind the wheel public road the training does not include with the time the entry level the driver spends observing the operation of commercial motor vehicle when he or she is not in control of the vehicle. Entry level driver means the individual must complete the commercial driver license skill with the requirements of 383.71 prior to the receiving the CDL the first time, upgrading the Class A or Class B CDL, or the obtaining hazard material passenger first school bus endorsement for the first time. Definition does not individuals from whom the state of the waive of the CDL test skills test for 383.77 of the individual seeking to remove restrictions in accordance with 383.135B7. Entry level driver training means that the training entry level driver received the NT of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration training provider registry provides prior to testing of the CDL skill test required with the receive the Class A Class B CDL the first time. Take of the CDL skill test required with the upgrade of the Class A or B CDL. Taking CDL skills is still required to obtain passenger or school bus endorsement the first time, and the CDL knowledge test will require to obtain the hazard material endorsement the first time. The range means the area that must be free of obstruction, enable the drivers to manually, safely, freely of the interference of the other vehicle that hazards and has adequate sight lines. Theory of instruction means the knowledge of the instruction operation commercial motor vehicle related matters provided with the theory of the instruction for the lectures, demonstration, the audio visual presentation, computer-based instruction-driven simulations, devices, online training. Similar means theory instruction means the individual provide with the knowledge and instruction operation commercial motor vehicle that meets one of these qualifications. Alright, holds the commercial driver's license, same with a higher class with all the endorsement necessary to operate commercial motor vehicle, with the training is provided with at least 2 years of experience of driving the commercial motor vehicle CDL with the same, the higher of the class and or same, the endorsement meets the applicable state qualification requirements commercial motor vehicle instructor. 2. A commercial driver's license for the same higher in class with all the endorsement necessary to operate the commercial motor vehicle, with which training is provided with at least 2 years of experience. The behind the wheel training of the commercial motor vehicle instructor meets all the applicable state qualification requirements of the commercial motor vehicle instructor. Or exemption, instructor is not required to hold the CDL of the same or higher class when all the endorsements necessary to operate with the commercial motor vehicle, with training that to be provided in the instructor previously held a CDL of the same or higher class and complies with the other requirements set forth in the paragraphs 1, 2, and 3 of this definition. Instructor for the CDL has been canceled, suspended, revoked due to the disqualifying offenses identified in 383.51. Instructor prohibited engaging in the theory of the instruction in 2 years following the date of his CDL is reinstated. Alright, 4. Exemption. Training provided to the online content with exclusivity are not required to meet state qualification requirements of theory instructor. Training provider meets either the install of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration provider registry required for the subpart G with the part of the training providers are part not limited to training schools, the higher educational institution, rural electrical cooperatives, motor carriers, state, local government, schools, districts, joint labor management programs, owner operators, individuals. Alright, 38609, general entry level driving training requirements. The individual who apply for the first time Class A, Class B, CDL for the upgrade of the Class A, Class B must complete the driver training provided list of the training program provided registry set forth in Subpart G. Individuals seeking to obtain the passenger pit and school bus and hazard material endorsements for the first time must complete with the training related to the endorsement training provider listed on the training provider registry set forth in Subpart G. Alright, Subpart G. Registering entry-level driver training providers, 38700. Scope of the rules subpart establish eligibility requirements listing the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration training providing registry within order to provide entry-level driver training compliance with the part training provides must be listed in the training provide registry. 38703 requirements listing of the training provider registry. To be eligible listing of the training providing registry entry must follow the curriculum that meets the applicable criteria set forth in Appendix A through E with the Part 380. Utilize the facility that meet the criteria set forth in 38709. Utilize vehicles that meet the criteria set forth in 38711. Utilize driver training and instruction that meet the criteria set forth in 38713. 5.1. Be licensed, certified, registered, and authorized to provide training in accordance with the applicable laws, regulation of any state, with whether in-person training and conduct exempt status, state qualification requirements otherwise applicable to theory instruction do not apply to the providers offering such instruction only. Allow the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration authorized representative to audit and investigate the training provider's operation and ensure the provider meets the criteria set forth in the section. Electronically transmit the entry-level driving training provider registry form through the training provider registry website maintained with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. And attest the training provider meets all the applicable requirements of this section and to obtain the unique training provider registry number of the number. The training provider has more than one camp at the training location. Training provider must electronically transmit entry-level driver to training provider registration form on each campus training location in order to obtain the unique training provider register number for each location. When a provider meets the requirements of 38703, 707, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration will issue the provider unique training provider register number, the applicable to the provider name, and the contact information training provider register. Alright, 38707, the entry-level training providers must require that all accept the application behind the wheel training with a certified with the bill comply with the U.S. Department of Transportation Regulation Part 40, 382, 383, 390, and with the state and or local laws regulated control of substance for the testing and age medical certification licensing driving record. Training providers must verify all except the behind the wheel training applications hold vehicle valid commercial driver license, permanent commercial driver license applicable to training providers offering online training must ensure the content that is prepared with delivered in theory of the instructor as defined in 38605. Separate training providers may delivery theory of behind the wheel training of both portions. Where in public road, basic training behind the wheel training must be delivered to the same training provider. Or 38709, facility with the training providers classroom range facilities must comply with all applicable federal, state, and or local statute regulation. 38711, equipment all vehicles used behind the wheel training must comply with the applicable federal, state, and safety requirements. Training vehicles must stand in the same group with the type of the driver trainees intended to operate the CDL skill test. 38713, instructor's requirement theory training provides must be utilized with the instructor who with the theory the instructor defined in 38605. Behind the wheel training provided to utilize the instructor who with the behind the wheel training instructor defined in 38605. 387.15 assessment. The training providers must assessment with the written electronic format to determine the driver training's proficiency with the driver knowledge objective of the theory portion of each of the unit of instruction Appendix A through E. With the 380 applicable, the driver training must receive their overall minimum score 80% with the theory assessment. Trailing instructor evaluating document training, driver training proficiency behind the wheel training in accordance with the curricular Appendix A with the through D with the Part 380 is applicable. 387.17 training certification after individual training administrative. The provide with list of the training provider registry of the provider must by midnight second business day after the driver training complete with the training electronically transmit the certification and information from the training provider registry website, including the following: driver training number within the driver license, commercial license, learner's permit, commercial driver license applicable to the state licensure with the commercial driver license class, endorsement type of the training, the area of the behind the wheel training of the driver completed, training completed, number of clock hours of the driver trainee spent completing the behind the wheel training is applicable, the name of the training provider with the unique training provider register identification number, and dates of the successful training completion. Alright, 388.719 requirements containing the listing of the training provided with the registry to be eligible to consist of the listing of the training provider registry. The provided must meet with the requirements of the subtitle of the applicable requirements of 387.03 biannual update of the entry level driver training provided registration form for Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration chamber. The fee of the information identified in paragraph A31 of section within 30 days of the key of the chain. The key information defined in training provided address and phone, the number type of the training offered for the training provided status if applicable to any of the change of the state license or certification accreditation statuses. Trainers must report electronically transmitting update of the entry-level driver training provided registration form, maintain documentation, state license or registration certification bearing providing authorized providing training in the state with the applicable. All out audit and investigation of the training provider is to be completed for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration authorized representative if it requests to ensure all required documents with set forth in 387.25 available to Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Its authorized representative upon the request of the provider must submit the documentation with 48-hour request. Alright, 387.21 removal of the training program registry factors. Consider the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration may remove a provider from the training provider registry if the provider fails to meet to maintain any of the qualifications established so part of the requirements of the other state federal regulations applicable to the provider. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration removes the provider from the training provider registry if the training is conducted after the removal of the date, but is considered individual invalid. Federal factors the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration may consider the removal of the provider of the training provider registry if they include but not limited to the following: the provider fails to comply with the requirements to continue listing with the training provider register described in 387.19. Provider, if it denies the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration authorized representative the opportunity to conduct an audit investigation of the training operation, audit investigation of the conduct. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration is authorized representative to identify the materials of deficiency pertaining to the training provider program's operational eligibility. The provider files claims that license certified required authorized to provide training in accordance with the applicable laws, regulations, and any of the state within the person of the training provided. State administered CDL skill examination passage rate for the applicant's Class A, CDL, Class B, CDL passenger endorsement and or school bus endorsement completing the provider's training of the CDL knowledge testing passage rate with the application hazard material enforcement endorsement with complete provider's training instant fraud other criminal behavior training provided with the driver trainings have the knowledge participated with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Serves on the right on the case-by-case basis of the retroactive invalidated training conducted under this part. Alright, 387.23, remove the training provided with the registry, proceed with the voluntary, remove the voluntary, remove the training provided registry, the provider with the most submit with the written notice, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration Director, Office of Carrier Driver, the Vehicle Safety Standards Director. Upon receiving the written notice of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, will remove the training of the provider with the training provider registry on and after the date issued with the notice of proposed removal of the training provider registry issued with the accordance with the paragraph B with the section and such of the voluntary notice and will not be effective. Involuntary removal of the notice of the proposed removal of the accepted provided in paragraph A and E with the section Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration initiates the provide process involuntary removal of the provider with the training provider registry with the issue of the written notice provider stating the reason for the proposed removal to set forth any of the corrective action necessary provided to remain in the training provider register. His notice of proposed removal of the issue of the provider to notify the current driver license training driver training schedule for the future training of the proposed removal of the notice of the proposed removal of the issue of the training site provider training provider registry website. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration will note that the training provider registry website that such notice has been issued. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration remove the notation of the notice withdrawn. Alright, C. With the response of the notice of the removal of the sort of corrective action of the training with the provider with the receive the notice of the proposed removal of the wishes to remain in the trainer provider registry will submit the written response to the director no later than 30 days after the date of issuance. Notice explaining the belief the decision of not properly described in paragraph C1 of this section. Alternatively, provided set forth the corrective action taken in response to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Notice proposed removal of the described in C2 of this section. Opposing notice of the proposed removal of the provider believe the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration errors information of the proposing removal of the training provider registry must explain the basis for the belief of the providing support documentation. The director will review the explanation. If the director finds the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration has relied erroneous information to provide removal of the training provider with the training provider registry, the director with withdrawal of the notice of the proposed removal will notify the provider with the withdrawing of the writing. If the director finds the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration not relied on erroneous information proposing removal, the director will affirm the notice of the proposed removal to notify the provider written of the determination no later than 60 days after the day of the director affirms the notice of the proposed removal. The other agreed to be provided with the director, and the provider must comply with the subpart of the corrective deficiency identified in the notice proposed removal as described in paragraph C2 of this section. And 3, the provider does not respond within writing of the 30 days of the issuance of the notice of the proposed removal. The removal becomes effective immediately. The provider will be removed in training provider registry within training conducting. The removal date is invalid. Corrective action must comply with the subpart complete with the corrective action specified with the notice of proposed removal no later than 60 days of the eve of the date of issuance. Notice of the proposed removal the day of the directive with the subsequent affirms the modified the notice of proposed removal. Must provide documentation for the completion of the corrective action. The director may conduct the investigation request any of the documentation necessary to verify that the provider has complied with the subpart complete with the required corrective action. The director will notify the provider in writing whether it meets the requirements of the continued list of the training provider registry. If the provider fails to complete with the proposed corrective action within 60-day period, the provider will remove the training provider registry. Will notify the provider in writing of the removal of the request of the administrative review. The provider has been removed from the training provider registry under paragraph C1 and 3 and the C2 and C2 and the E of the section provided with the may request the administrative review. The request may be submitted in writing to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, Associated Administrator of the Policy, Associated Administrator, until later than 30 days after the effective date of the removal. The request must explain the alleged error of the committee with the removal. They can provide with the training provider registry, include all factual, legal, procedural issue of the dispute, as well as any supporting documentation. Alright, additional procedure for the administrative review. The administrator may provide and submit the additional information attended with the confound for the discovery of the removal. If the provider does not provide the information requested, does not attend with the scheduled conference of the associated administrator, may dismiss the request of administrative review. Decision administrative review with the associated administrator will complete with the administrative review with the non-notice of the provider written decision. The decision constitutes final agency action. The associated administrator deems removal to be invalid. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration reinstates the providing listing of the training provider register. Or an emergency removal within case of the fraud of the criminal behavior, the willful disregard of the regulation in the subpart within which the public health and the interest of the safety required of the provision paragraph D of the section are not applicable. In this case, director may be made immediately remove the provider of the training provider registry with the instance of the fraud of the other criminal behavior that was training provided in which the driver trainees have knowingly participated in Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration reserves the right to retroactively invalidate training conducted under the subpart. A provider who has removed it under the provisions of the paragraph may request administrative review on the decision described under the paragraph D of this section. F. Reinstatement of the training program registry any one time after the training provider voluntarily removal of the training provider registry of the provider may apply with the director to be reinstated no sooner than 30 days after the day of the provider's involuntary removal of the training provider registry. The provider may apply with the director to be reinstated. The provider must submit the documentation showing the completion of any of the correction action identified with the notice of proposed removal. The final notice of the removal is applicable. Alright, 387-25, documentation record retention. Applicability documentation retention of records required for the subpart apply with the NU to meet the requirements of subpart F of the part of the eligible listing of the training provider registry. Document retention. All training with the provider of the training provider registry must retain the following self-certifications, all except the applicants behind the wheel of the training and testing that they will comply with the U.S. Department of Transportation regulations, Part 40, 382, 383, and 391, as well as state or local laws related to the alcohol, controlled and substance testing, age, medical certification, licensing, driver records is required in 387-07A. Copy of the driver's training commercial learnings permit of the commercial driver's license as applicable, required in 387-07A. Instructor qualification documentation indicating the driver and or training experience is applicable in each of the instructor. Copy of the commercial driver's license applicable to the endorsement held by the behind-the-wheel training instructor or theory instructors is applicable to the training provider registry with the form submitted with the training provider registry. The lessons plan with the theory behind-the-wheel range of the public road training circular is applicable. The records the individual entry level of training assessment as described in 387-15. Retention of records. Training providers listed in the training provider registry must retain records identified in the paragraph B of the section minimum of 3 years of the day that each of the required records generated and received unless the records such as the behind the wheels and training instructor CDL has expired or has been canceled. In case of the most recent valid CDL shall be retained if applicable. The provision of the part does not affect the training provider's obligation to comply with any of the local, state, federal requirements of prescribing longer retention periods for any category of the records described herein. And we'll save Appendix A's and 380 class CDL training curriculum in case I decide to start a training curriculum. And this was special training requirements, 380.